The predicted markets, the betting markets, the RC, real clear politics averages, everything sort of broke at the same time. How long ago, Dan?
That's right, Joe. Good morning, and we're less than 2 weeks out. You really started to see about three big changes about 3 weeks ago. The first is the congressional generic ballot turned to the Republicans. Republicans have won midterm elections, even when that was pointing to a slight Democratic lead. So it's pretty strong when the Republicans are in the lead. Number two, the betting odds began to move. And number three, we build election portfolios at Strategas. We have a Republican portfolio, a Democratic portfolio. These are the stocks that will benefit if either party wins. And what we do, Joe, is we run those stocks relative to each other to see how the market is pricing in the election. And we found that this has been a much better indicator of polls in the last few presidential cycles. For most of August and September, this was projecting a Republican House and a Democratic Senate, just a 35% chance of a Republican sweep. And over the last 3 weeks, that number has doubled. We've gone from about a 35% chance of a Republican sweep to a 70% chance of a Republican sweep. So the move has been dramatic, and it's being reflected in the polls, the betting odds, and now even in the stock market.
What is in the Republican portfolio, if you will? What's in the Democratic portfolio? And have you seen actual movement in the past 3 weeks? In the last week, the markets, do you think the overall market is responding to what's happening in the UK or the 10-year or a possible swivel? I call it a swivel instead of it. So there's a lot of things that are going on, and you can never do an experiment if you can never back out all the variables that could be involved. So there's no way to say definitively one way or another, but we've had a good week. Or at least five,
absolutely.
6
And let's just take those separately. Where we're seeing the Republican portfolio start to get a lot of momentum are in three key areas. Energy infrastructure, to your point, that could be around just higher oil prices. Also, the Republicans are likely to do permitting reform. But immigration stocks that will benefit from better immigration enforcement at the border. We think that's pretty isolated in terms of what the Republicans' priority is going to be. And the third, defense spending, again, also impacted by other events, what's going on in Ukraine and China. But those are the three big areas that we've been seeing the momentum in the Republican portfolio. And all three are election related, even if it's at least partially. On the other side, where you're seeing the real weakness in the Democratic portfolio has been in clean energy stocks. These stocks got a really big bounce when President Biden passed his Inflation Reduction Act. You're talking about a 15% underperformance relative to the S&P 500 over the last 30 days in the stocks. Now, Joe, we tend to think that this is a little bit overdone. It's going to be pretty hard for the Republicans to do something meaningful to take some of those tax credits back. But I think that's the real pure play on the election. And let me make one other point. If you see that the consensus is wrong and the election begins to shift and that the Republicans are only going to win the House, Democrats are going to win the Senate, I think you'll see that manifest itself in those clean energy stocks, which will likely rally into the election. To the broader market, we have found that the midterm elections, just getting to the midterm elections, has been the catalyst for the S&P 500, regardless of who wins the party. A lot of the silly season goes away. You tend to get a lot more fiscal tightening in a midterm election year. And then once presidents usually suffer large midterm election losses, they begin to look for more fiscal policy. And the market begins to sniff out that you're going to get better fiscal and monetary policy. That may be a lot more restricted this time because of inflation, rising interest costs on the debt. But I wouldn't be surprised if you see an aggressive lame duck session of Congress in the weeks after the midterm election as Congress tries to get as much done before the Republicans take over on January 3rd. So the election is just a 1 point. We're probably going to have an exciting year end as well.